AI takes the traditional leader out of the equation and redefines what is the role of said leader.
And with AI coming in and enabling leaders to do automation around reporting and statuses and so on, what's your take on the future leader?
The future leader needs to give up on the vision of being a machine. I hope that artificial intelligence just being so infinitely better than humans at many of these tasks, many of these complex reasoning tasks that deal with quantifiable outcomes, are going to remind us what does it actually mean to be human, and what does it then require to be a human leader in orchestrating a workforce.
This is Pantrium. We bring you the truth of tech leadership and the unfiltered stories of what really happens when no one's watching. From billion-dollar screw-ups to behind-the-scene battles, we lift the curtain on modern leadership and we reveal what it actually takes to build, grow, and lead in this crazy, fast-moving world. Hosted by myself, Christie Kristensen, it is time to get real and have deeper conversations. David, welcome to the Pantrium podcast.
Thank you so much, Christy. Pleasure to be here.
I'm okay to say this publicly. I've tried to hunt you down for a very long time, so I'm very happy to have you here now.
Yeah, super excited to be here because you finally called me, and been looking forward to joining you as well.
Yeah, you have been flying all over the world, so I'm just pleased to be able to catch you on this afternoon. Where we're going to talk about your career journey and what leadership means, especially also in the world of AI. Before we go into all of that and getting into our conversation, as you may know, I ask all my guests to introduce themselves with a fun fact. So, David, what's your fun fact?
I don't know if it's a fun fact or not. That's for other people to decide. But I've been intrigued by birds my entire life. So I became a member of the Young Ornithologists at age 5, and I remember receiving these cassette tapes via mail, and you would pop them into your ghetto blast, and you could listen to different bird calls and try to recognize which bird you were hearing, and it's been an interest in ornithology that's followed me throughout my entire life, and I spend a lot of time birding when I have a free moment, and during my business travels, I always bring binoculars because you never know when you're in a situation where you might spot a bird, and if you're somewhere far away, even a common bird is going to be special to you. That's probably one of my lesser known interests for people who know me professionally, but it's something I'm quite keen on.
I love that. I actually just thought you may actually know this movie. It's a silly movie on Netflix about it's a British kind of rom-com of this murder that took place in the White House, I want to say, where the lady, the inspector, is really into birds, and she will stop mid-scene of looking at a crime and for looking at a bird because she hears the sound. I just thought about that. Have you seen it?
No, I've not seen it. I have heard of it, and it reminds me a little bit of myself because I've done that on a couple of occasions. Like
I will
in
find it and send it to you. This is, I could
yeah,
imagine that would be you, like mid meeting, like.
absolutely. I did that. I had a meeting with, so I work in artificial intelligence. I suppose we'll get into all of that. And I was in China in November, meeting with some of the AI leaders in China on a study trip. And while we were out taking a walk and having a conversation on artificial intelligence, I had to interrupt the person I was speaking to say, hang on a second, there's a really interesting bird up in that tree. I've never seen it before. I want to find out. It was a particular type of magpie, and I want to find out which magpie it is.
I love it. Oh my God, I have to find this movie. I have just saved your Friday night movie night. Oh, that's brilliant. David, we're going to continue down the route of AI. Let's talk about your career journey and how did you get to your position today where you sit in SAP and focus on AI across the Nordics. So what's your career journey? How did you get to the point where you are today?
That's a question I often ask myself. I think I've never had sort of a real clear path or end goal in my career, other than I always want to do something that's interesting, that has an impact. And I've always been fascinated by working on complex issues, or even wicked problems, as they're referred to. So I started off my educational journey studying sociology and economics, a combination of the two. Partly in Denmark, where I'm from, and partly in the United States. And that gave me really great insight into all of the stuff that's not measurable, all the stuff you can't quantify it in detail. The really interesting stuff that we tend to neglect or tend to downplay in policy discussions, business conversations, because it's not something you can really put on a balance sheet. And if we do, then it's oftentimes something we just draw a little bit out of thin air to find out what what do our intangibles look like. And that was kind of my educational background. Once I was done with that, I moved into the military. So I was done with the school bench. So became a language officer in the Royal Danish Army, specializing in Pashto, which is the largest language spoken in southern Afghanistan, northwestern Pakistan.
Wow.
Did a specialization in Dari as well, which is what they speak in northern Afghanistan. Part of the education, my whole cohort did that. And then having done that for a couple of years, 4 years to be exact, I moved into private enterprise, and the equivalent of doing kind of complex analysis, cultural analysis, military analysis, strategy analysis in a global context for military is management consulting for business. So you're dealing with sort of incomplete foundation of data, stakeholders of various degree of cooperation. I would say when you're a management consultant, also have to kind of decipher what is the true meaning that they're actually trying to give you, what is the core issue at hand to achieve your objectives. And that's where I spent a lot of years before then finally being asked to join SAP 3.5 years ago.
I wanted to ask because there's two areas that sometimes or often are being referred to when it comes to leadership, coaching, guidance, inspiration for leaders. It is either the sport of football and coaching,
Mm-hmm.
or military. Do you see, from your experience in the military and through that experience on the ground and teamwork and so on, can you tell me a little bit more about what you've taken with you from that world into the corporate world?
That's a great question. I think I've taken so much from my military background into the corporate world. Military is essentially a large amalgamation of incredibly different specializations and skill sets across an enormous spectrum. You have anything in the military, from people who know how to operate in the air, from pilots to forward air controllers, to people on the ground who are managing air operations in the Air Force, to people in the Navy who are in charge of everything on the high seas, and then, of course, the Army, which is where I spent my time, which is on land-based operations, and then combining those three different elements of the military into successful operations. And then within each of those three different branches, you have just a variety of specialties as well. People who are very sort of operationally geared, specialists in particular systems, or particular maneuvers, or course capabilities, and then people who are more kind of doing a lot of the analysis, a lot of the background stuff. And then people like me, where sort of language officer function. A lot of the wonderful colleagues I had at the time, what we were educated to do was to be kind of the glue in between culture and corporation and military outcomes. And
Yeah.
all of that gave me a lot of respect for different skill sets, and it gave me a lot of competencies in navigating different skill sets in a way to achieve a broader goal. I don't think I've been in any organization before or since the Army that can achieve essentially anything that it sets its mind to when people work together. Then there are always political complications because the army is ultimately given a political mandate they have to live up to. But there are just so many different ways that you can orchestrate outcomes in the military successfully with the many skill sets that you have. And I think I've taken that from a leadership perspective into my subsequent career. I think just from a personal perspective, a lot of the tools that you get in terms of remaining calm, if all you have is a deadline in front of you, there's nothing really to be that worried about, to being on time for meetings and polishing your shoes every once in a while.
Yeah.
There's some good personal competencies as well to take from it. I encourage every young person I know who has not had an exposure to the military to explore it early in their career, or even after they finish school, whenever I have these conversations at university and so forth, because I think there's a lot to be had from it. And I've met people from so many different parts of the military, both at home and abroad, who have completely different skill sets than mine, and some are very specialized and incredible in their areas of expertise, and they've had a similar experience, even though they've worked on something completely different.
Yeah. Fascinating. And I wanted to move our conversation a bit more into the corporate life. Can you put some words on what were some of your biggest learnings as you moved into SAP, and the first role you had within SAP? Can you tell me a little bit more about those learnings first?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was asked to develop a cloud value advisory function in SAP when I joined, create the internal movement for cloud and the external advisory capability for cloud at a time where SAP as a company was transitioning from being the world's leading business suite to customers, but delivering their software in an agnostic way in terms of how it was deployed, towards taking a strategic move to cloud, where SAP took a much more holistic approach to the software that they delivered and the outcomes that their software would drive. And that was a cultural shift internally in SAP in terms of the competencies that you needed to possess, in terms of what you were measured on, not just measured on bookings, but also measured on things like adoption and churn and actual customer success and outcomes. And also for customers, it was very much a journey in terms of not just thinking about SAP as the individual licenses that you needed to procure for our software solutions, but also thinking of SAP as a partner in the transformation you were trying to undertake, whether it was a transformation for finance or for supply chain or for human capital management or for something else entirely. And that journey for me was incredibly exciting. That's why I said yes to the opportunity when it came, even though I didn't have an SAP specific background. I wasn't deep in the technology, but I had worked as a management consultant across many different transformations, some that were successful, some that were not successful. And I've kind of seen what worked and what didn't work. And the way that we in SAP, I think, have achieved this successfully is that we've been very clear on the outcomes that we want to achieve and the metrics that we want to have in place in order to make sure that we are actually reaching set outcomes, and the way that we then also reward the achievement of set outcomes in the way that we provide internal measurements around set outcomes. I think that has been instrumental in the move to cloud for SAP. But when I joined, it was, I think, something the market was sort of in a wait and see position in terms of whether SAP would accomplish this. Would it be a success or not? And that was also certainly the case for many of our customers. And the market sentiment today, I think broadly, I can say non-controversially, that the market sentiment is that it's been a massive success for SAP. The move to cloud, it is a success story, and we're bringing a lot of our customers to the cloud and are able to position new solutions and new types of services to them as a result. One of those being AI, which is what I head up now in the Nordics and Baltics.
And before we go into AI, I wanted to stick with what you just talked about there in terms of transformation. And you were saying you've seen what works and what doesn't. When you bring both your internal teams on this journey of transformation and cultural change, but also the customers to ensure that adoption. Could you tell me a little bit more about what your experiences have been, and also advice to others of what worked and what didn't.
In any kind of transformation, you are going to have tangible synergies that you want to measure, and those are going to be measured at a board level or at a steerco level, whatever. If it's a consulting project or it's internally in your organization, you're measuring those tangible outcomes that you want to achieve, often defined in financial terms, which is great. But those outcomes need to be coupled to concrete initiatives at the cultural level and at the organizational level, in my experience, in order to succeed. And I've seen many times as a management consultant that you are developing a strategy, you're guiding a strategy execution at one layer, and then the organization at another layer is trying to maintain status quo and do with what they know best, because
Yeah.
it's always what you know best that you revert back to as a human being. I think most employees, most people, most organizations want to do a good job. They want to achieve what they know in the best possible way. I don't buy into the fact that sort of people just want to slack off or achieve as little as possible. I think we're fundamentally outcome driven. Most of us are outcome driven as individuals. We want to do something with our time when we're at work. But it's difficult to do something if it's new, which means you're going to be unproductive for the beginning of the transformation, because you have to learn something new. You have to achieve a new skill set or move towards a new way of thinking. And if we're measuring productivity very early on without recognizing that initial lag, that initial investment that needs to happen from the individual employee to the individual organizational unit, then we kind of risk saying one thing and then measuring and asking people to do another thing. And that disconnects drifts over time. And then you end up having a strategy or digital initiative that lives on paper, but is not coming to life in practice. One example I can give in that aspect in terms of artificial intelligence, right, is a lot of companies have AI strategies in place of all the wonderful things that they want to achieve. And they're launching proof of concepts, proof of value of, incredible potential that exists somewhere in their organization, in the supply chain, whatever. We can optimize inbound logistics, inventory holding costs, cut them down by 30%. Business case is incredible. And at the same time, the people who are actually in logistics and inbound and managing the inventory are being asked to make sure, is there enough safety stock in place? Are we meeting customer demand? Are we ready to make sure that if demand shifts, that we have enough of product X that we can ship to customers? So the proof of concept and the idea lives in one part of the organization. The execution of business operations lives in another part of the organization. Then that AI initiative never comes to life. If you start experimenting from day one, I always encourage customers and partners to do this. Experiment from day one with small gradual increases in initiatives that can lead to better productivity live. Do it live, do it in actual operations. Then you start to see very quickly what works, what doesn't work, and you start very quickly to get super valuable learnings. And there's going to be a cost associated with that. There's going to be balls that are dropped, stuff that gets broken, but those are actually learnings, key learnings that you are investing in, so that when you're rolling it out and scaling it across at a big level, then you know what went wrong. You have already invested a little bit of money early on to find out what could lead to ultimate success.
I think it's super interesting, and also I wonder, do you see that this requires a mind shift?
Absolutely. I think there's a shift from a leadership perspective as well that needs to be made. I'm in the software world now, and I've been in sort of the digital side of things also during my management consulting career, very much working on the technology side of the equation. Within technology, within software, we've had this concept of agile development and scaled agile processes for a number of years. And one of the main sort of key objectives of that is the ability to deliver incremental value, is the ability to have the users and the functional experts drive the development and not some people in a back office or in a supervisory function. And then build up a backlog of things that needs to be done, and then let the teams that are actually doing the development and executing it choose which part of the backlog do they take and bring further into production. That's sort of very high level, just generic description of what Agile is. One of the challenges that Agile has met in organizations in terms of coming to fruition, coming to actual value, is that it meets the reality of separate P&Ls. It meets the reality of separate leadership silos, because you have this sort of very democratized approach to how you're developing a piece of software, some big solution that's a lot of money going into it, but then it meets the reality of a command and control structure elsewhere in the organization, where we're expecting weekly status reports, traffic lights, are we green, red, yellow on X, Y, and Z. We are mandating, asking a leader to be a single point of control for a part of this broad, democratized development process. So we're kind of trying to combine two things that do not necessarily speak together. And I think that's a huge challenge. And I think one of the ideas I've been noodling around with a little bit is that artificial intelligence, the whole move, the whole shift we're seeing in ways of working right now at an organizational level, it may be the thing that finally gets AI to work, because it takes the traditional leader out of the equation and redefines what is the role of said leader, what is the mandate of said leader. Is it still to be the single point of control? Well, there's no real reason for that. I mean, unless there's some kind of evolutionary reason for it, or from a biological perspective, we like to say it's John's fault when stuff doesn't matter. But there's nothing, there's no real good argument for why it needs to be that way, because already today machines are so much better at doing that than we are, and they're now also becoming much better at synthesizing different streams of information and data while preserving that context of what does it actually mean, that data, what is it that the objective or outcome is we're trying to achieve. And you're seeing that with agentic AI, you're seeing it with multi-agentic AI, where you're orchestrating different hyper automation pieces of software for one kind of hive mind, if you will, of how to achieve an outcome. So what's the role of the human leader in that? Well, in my opinion, it's not to be the person who's sitting there taking notes and that's, all right, that's in yellow, I want to know why that particular stream's in yellow. I have a paper on my desk by Monday explaining it to me. This is a meaningless question. And also for the people who are working on the projects, it's meaningless to have a leader, me, for example, be the person they need to reach out to. And I may be available next Friday from 1 to 2 as I'm coming out of one meeting and going into another meeting. It's much more valuable if they can have a machine to be the point of control for that. And that then redefines what is the role of the leader. And I think the role of the leader is then very much to be that glue, that person who manages to tie together different spheres of interest and different motivations at a cultural level, at this intangible level that's so difficult for us to quantify. But deep down, we kind of know it's what matters. It's the thing that drives excellence. We just have difficulty in quantifying it, which means sometimes we then actually forget to take it into account in terms of how we drive business value. And I hope that artificial intelligence, just being so infinitely better than humans at many of these tasks, many of these complex reasoning tasks that deal with quantifiable outcomes, are going to remind us, what does it actually mean to be human, and what does it then require to be a human leader in orchestrating a workforce.
There's so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
But
Do you
one
agree,
thing
Christie? Or
I do. And
Yeah.
I think it's super interesting because, again, to your point, like, what is the real value of a person? Is it to make a report every month, or is it something else, right? And to your point, that human aspect of it and the soft skills become perhaps more in the center. With that, and with AI coming in and enabling leaders to do automation around reporting and statuses and so on, what's your take on the future leader?
I think the future leader needs to give up on the vision of being a machine. If your vision is to be a machine, you're going to lose. Because the machines are better at being machines, trust me. And the rate at which they're becoming even better is ridiculous, right? Even for super complex tasks. I mean, and let me just spend like 1 second on that. So you have this thing called the GPQA Diamond Survey, which is it's a constructed survey of specialized PhD level questions that you can ask an expert in a given field. And if you are a human expert within a field like microbiology, for example, you have a PhD in that field, you'll get around 70% on the GPQA Diamond Survey. A year and a half ago, the leading models in generative AI, one form of artificial intelligence, got about 30%, 35%. The leading models right now are scoring at about 85%. So they're already significantly outpacing humans in capabilities across, complex reasoning tasks. Where they're going to be, after summer, they're not going to be worse off. Let me put it that way. So, we're being redefined across multiple parameters because it's not just dummy work either. It's not just typing in stuff in Excel or aligning figures in PowerPoint. It's super complex reasoning tasks. Also, I think from a human leader perspective, if you want to be successful in that future, you need first to be humble about where the future is taking us. We don't know. And I think it's so much up in the air right now. I cannot remember at any point in my career where it has been that much up in the air. I think probably the last time was when the internet was launched, and that was before I entered the workforce. You need a certain level of humility in terms of what your tasks are going to be in the future. That means versatility is a super important skill, and the versatility of your human workforce as well, their tolerance for ambiguity or for uncertainty is super important, and your ability to alleviate that uncertainty on a soft skill basis is an important leadership parameter. I also think that successful leaders of the tomorrow are going to be able to lead a synthetic workforce of both humans and non-humans, non-human intelligence. And leading a synthetic workforce kind of means what the limitations are of each component and how they work best together. How do you combine complex reasoning at an algorithmic level with and creativity exists as well at an algorithmic level, but how do you combine that with the human impetus to create something? Because that's the one thing machines don't have, and it's difficult to kind of see how they would achieve that. At least so far, it is something that is human. We're the ones doing the prompting. It's not the other way around. We're not the promptees. We are the prompters. We should maintain that if we want to stay human in the workplace. That we are the people doing the prompting, and that means, for example, that if you are in finance, let's say you're working in finance and you want to be able to do forecasting, you want to look into possible outcomes in whatever kind of scenario. If you're doing an acquisition, or you're just doing budgeting, or you're whatever, right? Then the ability for your financial controllers to be creative is extremely important. The ability for them to do the actual number crunching is less important. And that's one of the things we're seeing in SAP, for example. What we're working on in the finance part of our portfolio, we're working very much on the ability of our software to do super complex modeling, lots of scenario-based analysis, draw data directly from the internet, draw data directly from your enterprise, Make sure you have the same, what's called the same semantic meaning across, which is a huge issue in business data, making sure that data means the same thing.
Uh,
That's often not the case today. Like a vendor means the same thing if data that's sitting in our finance system or data that's sitting in our supply chain system. It's not always that it means the same thing, but making sure it means the same thing, then being able to combine that with data live from the internet and draw super complex conclusions on the back of it. Like say electricity prices rise by 5%, or what if the Fed does not lower interest rates in the US? What does that mean for our foreign currency exposure? What does that foreign currency exposure translate into in terms of our cost of capital as a company? And what does that mean then for the potential investments that we're looking to undertake into a new business area? Like these are real questions that you ask yourself if you're working in financial portfolio management today, but the ability to ask those questions from a machine means you need the creativity to ask the right questions. And then the machine's going to be able to deliver you a multitude of answers in a multitude of scenarios.
yeah.
I hope
I,
that's a good way of answering your question, Christie. It's about being able to be a good storyteller and a good envisioner of a story, in my opinion, if you are a successful employee in that position for the future.
yeah. And I think it's interesting because, and I'm keen to hear about your, specific examples of how you're doing that as a leader, right? Because historically, as a leader, of course, there's many other things, but of course, be on top of the numbers. You need to know how is the business going, right? And suddenly it becomes more, as you say, the freedom of creativity, freedom of strategic thinking, and the soft human skills that becomes equally important, because the data crunching, as you say, can be outsourced. It can be done better by a computer, by technology. What have you done, or what are you doing to also develop yourself as a leader in this ever-changing world?
Yeah, these are very easy questions.
Very easy question. 3 easy takeaways for the audience. Easy peasy.
Yeah. Just do A, B, and C, and you'll be golden. Yeah. Look, I think the funny thing is, as knowledge is going to become more and more easy to come by, and complex reasoning on the back of that knowledge is going to become more and more easy to get by. Actually, it also becomes more and more important to understand those outcomes. I think if we kind of lean back and take an approach saying, as leaders and as a workforce,
Yeah.
as humans, if we lean back and say, you know what, machines have got this. Why do I need to learn this thing, right? That's not the right approach to take, because you have the chance, if you're not bogged down in needing to do everything detailed every single time and become an expert in a very sort of in a sliver of an area, that means you have the chance to learn all of the concepts and learn how those different concepts relate to one another. What are the meanings within this field of knowledge, and how do those meanings translate into a different field of knowledge? This is super fluffy. This is my sociology background, rearing its head here. But like, this is what creates bureaucracy and silos in organizations today, and creates friction. Is that the people who are in manufacturing are just fed up with those idiots in sales who don't know the product, and they're just selling stuff left and right. And the people in sales are fed up with those, people in manufacturing who aren't quick enough, or they're not creating what the customer wants, or they have a huge backlog of items. There's just, why are they so slow getting what we need? And this creates a lot of friction, creates a lot of different truths that exist in organizations. And we try and bring those truths together through something we call bureaucracy. We try to control those frictions through tiered leadership in bureaucracy. So you need to have many management layers in place. You need to have complex reporting structures in place in order to create a shared truth and kind of a shared tower of control in your organization, so that different functions don't end up eating each other. Now, with sort of the paradigm that I'm alluding a little bit to, I think is going to be more prevalent. You have the chance as a leader to actually then start to learn better what is happening across the entire spectrum of the value chain that we're operating in. What's happening outside my niche, my silo of truth, and how do I bridge that to the other truths in the organization? That's going to remove the need for bureaucracy. All things being equal, that should lead to greater value creation for a company. It should lead to a larger cake overall coming out of the oven. If you were able to take such an approach, so I think that's super important to keep that learning mindset, that constant learning mindset, always exploring what else is out there.
Yeah. And is that because just before we went live, you mentioned this concept of horizontal versus vertical leadership. Is that related to what you're talking about here? And could you put some more words to that?
Yeah, I do think that's very related to it. So, like in my function, in my role, I do a lot of horizontal leadership. I'm spending a lot of my time leading people who are my peers, or leading people who may not be my peers, but they're in a different function than me, but building kind of a coalition around a specific objective. Like, say there's a customer, we want to build something really cool for them to succeed in their human capital management, workforce of tomorrow. I'm not a specialist in human capital management. I have people in my organization who are. I may not be the customer success. I'm not the customer success partner. I might not even know that customer particularly well, or have good insight into their industry. There are other people who are. If I can create a coalition of the willing, if you will, both internally in SAP and externally for the customer, around this idea of the future workforce or whatever, succeeding with artificial intelligence in HR, then I think I'm doing my job as a leader really well. And the old way of thinking would probably be that that's not really my area, that that's not for me. There's somebody in HR who owns HR, who's doing everything related to HR, and it's up to them to kind of go and say, I have this huge team, we're going to build this, and we're going to put it into the market, and then see who wants to consume it. So it's becoming more of an agile way of working horizontally. So I think as a leader, that capability is incredibly important. It also means the ability to be led, right? The ability to be led by your peers. That again requires something on an individual level. It's not everybody who enjoys being led, and certainly not by somebody they think of as their peer rather than their superior or direct superior, but is redefining new ways of working are redefining, I think, what successful execution looks like in a workforce. And you see this, by the way, in like some of the most valuable companies, leading companies in the world today, like Nvidia, right? I mean, Jensen Huang, he's got what, 30 people in his team or something like that. That's it. I mean, you didn't need 20,000 people. How are you going to lead 20,000 people? You can't. A machine can, but a human being can't, and cannot create any kind of relatability to 20,000 people or 100,000 people, whatever. So I think that's a new way of approaching successful leadership. I think the academic term for it, I may be mistaken, is servant leadership. And the idea here is that you, as a leader, you are there to serve the people that you are actually leading, whether you're leading them directly or indirectly, whether you are their formal leader or their informal leader.
In order to, and again with this mindset of the future, what rule would you love to see broken in order for us to move forward when it comes to leadership in this digital world?
What rule I'd love to see broken? Well, I have very much like a cross-functional background, right? I'm interested in so many different things, and I've done a lot of different things in my career. And I think from a personal perspective, that's been greatly enriching. I think in some organizations still there's a preference towards very much kind of narrowing down and specializing and going in one field and then becoming the specialist in that field.
Yeah.
I would like to see that rule broken. I would like to see the ability to cross synthesize different fields of knowledge as a core skill for successful organizations of tomorrow. The ability to bring in different layers of understanding, different meanings, different skill sets in order to achieve an outcome, I think is and again, this going back to my military days of how the military works as an organizational unit and succeeds as an organizational unit. It's not like the general could just jump in an F-16 plane and then fly the plane somewhere, jump out in a parachute, land in an armored battle tank, and then drive the battle tank somewhere, and then go down and sit and have a negotiation with somebody at a very complex level, and then go back and brief the prime minister of, this is what we did. You have the ability to lead all of these different areas and the ability to work cross-functionally, I think is incredibly important. And I'd love to see that rule broken in business.
Guys, 3 key takeaways from our conversation today.
3 key takeaways. Number 1, you ask really difficult questions, Christie. Which is great, right? Because we need to ask the difficult questions where there's not just a right answer. Asking difficult questions again and again are going to get us closer to the truth. Number 2 is the truth. We really don't know what that is, what that's going to be. So keeping our options open, keeping open positions in financial terms. You don't need to necessarily decide on one or the other. The ability to shift interchangeably between potential outcomes of the future might be what decides if you are a successful leader or a successful organization, a successful workforce. Finally, that necessitates the ability to work with others who do not think like you do, and the ability to integrate insights from other fields than your own. That's where artificial intelligence is able to bridge those gaps and give you tremendous tools to do much, much, much more with less, to augment your own output rather than just sort of leaning back and putting it on autopilot.
Yeah. Fantastic. And last question. Have you had a leader that have made a lasting impression on you?
Yeah, I think I've had several that have made lasting impressions. Some good and some not so good. Some made lasting impressions. Let's not get into that too much by kind of reminding me of this is not who I want to be when I'm a leader. And
That's
you know
also
what?
important.
Yeah, it's also important. And I would say kind of good news here is there's some kind of karmic force at play when it comes to that type of leadership, and it's a lesson for yourself as you become more mature as a leader, as you, God forbid, as you age into the leadership role. Right, it's actually a good thing because you become more experienced, but it's also a dangerous thing if you become complacent about it. I mean, I'm the leader, just do it because I said so. All right.
Yeah.
This kind of very complacent attitude is what you loathed when you were younger, when you were in your first positions. These people who just thought themselves magically better at things because they were the highest paid individual in the room. But that doesn't mean that they're necessarily right. So that's a warning sign for you as a leader in terms of where not to go. And then I think a leader that has had a very sort of positive impact on me as a person, and enabled me to explore new avenues would be one of my former partners in consulting. He's now got his own independent consultancy business, but he was one of my leaders in both Accenture and in Capgemini, a guy named Faisal Ramzan. And Faisal always encouraged me to explore new things, and he also encouraged me to set sort of very high ambitions for my own output. Never kind of leaning back and saying this is good enough, but always looking at it and saying, how can we make this even better? So he's one of those people that I often think about when I try to imagine what would the right approach be here from a leadership perspective in order to build a winning coalition and get the best output.
Yeah. Fantastic. I really love that. Being, keep pushing, keep thinking new, and stay open-minded for what's to come. David, we could have continued. We're out of time. I can't believe it already. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christie. It was certainly a pleasure.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you have feedback, topic ideas, or guest recommendations, we are all ears. Pantrium is growing thanks to our community of listeners. So if something resonated with you, we would love for you to share your favorite takeaways. And just a quick note. The views shared by our guests are entirely their own and don't necessarily reflect the companies they work for. That's it for now. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time.